There was an interesting moment yesterday with a lot of speculation in Washington when the DOJ, Merrick Garland and others at the Justice Department called a press conference about an urgent national security matter. It ended up actually being about an indictment of some Chinese spies here in Washington, and almost a comical case, which shows some of the tech wars that are happening at the governmental level right now. Let's take a listen.
Over the past week, the Justice Department has taken several actions to disrupt criminal activity by individuals working on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China. As always, the defendants in these cases are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Earlier today, in the Eastern District of New York, a complaint was unsealed charging 2 PRC intelligence officers with attempting to obstruct, influence, and impede a criminal prosecution of a PRC-based telecommunications company. The complaint alleges that in 2019, the defendants directed an employee at a U.S. government law enforcement agency to steal confidential information about the United States criminal prosecution of the company. The defendants believed that they had recruited the U.S. employee as an asset, but in fact, the individual they recruited was actually a double agent working on behalf of the FBI.
An amusing turn of events there. I think the case really was meant to just embarrass the Chinese intelligence services for being so embarrassing by trying to recruit somebody and pay them off.
Embarrass them for being embarrassing.
They really thought they really thought that they had it all figured out. They're like, oh, we just got to pay off this guy and we'll get our thing. And of course, the entire thing was like an FBI op the entire time. I mean, it does underscore a convenient talking point, which is the company Huawei, which was under investigation. The Chinese government keeps saying, well, we have nothing to do with the it's completely separate. We have no control over Huawei. Well, then why are you using your spies to try and defend them in U.S. court? That's interesting.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It also highlights, actually, some of the troubling connections that Huawei has here in Washington. Ken Vogel over the New York Times did a great job, put this up there on the screen. He shows just how many U.S. lobbyists are on the take for Huawei, which, you know, technically a foreign company, but in reality is a complete foreign government. The Podestas, you guys will remember, Squire Patton Boggs, Imperium Global Advisors.
These are big players in D.C. too.
Rosewood Consulting.
These aren't like fringe players. These are some of the big dogs.
I was going to say, these are some of the top Democratic lobbyists in all of D.C. Also, Krystal, our old company, The Hill, actually used to have Huawei ads, which used to trouble me significantly whenever we were over there. So nice to be independent, isn't it, folks? The point is that Huawei is genuinely just an arm of the Chinese intelligence service. I mean, I guess that's fine if we're all just open to telling the truth. However, should you allow them access to your critical infrastructure like 5G? I mean, that seems pretty insane. Definitely not something they would ever allow you over there. And yet, it's the fact that it's even up for debate here, I think is completely crazy. Let's go ahead and put the next one that's up there on the screen. Really what it shows you, though, is that China right now, their markets are taking a massive hit from two ends. Number one is actually their biggest stock losses since 2008 because foreigners had to sell a record of $2.5 billion in mainland shares. What that is troubling sentiment from investors in Washington, in London, and in Singapore who are worried that the inward-looking Xi Jinping administration after the People's Congress will make it much more difficult for foreigners to do business in China beyond how difficult it is right now. And two is, look, gotta give Biden credit where it's due. Some of his latest moves on the Chinese semiconductor industry. So it's complicated because it's not the victory that some have hailed. It is good that, you know, U.S. companies and all of that have to pull out of the Chinese semiconductor industry, but there are still many American citizens who are still working for major companies like ASML and other semiconductor companies that have been stealing U.S. technology and are effectively trying to supplant our defense industry and more. The point being, though, that the Biden administration's moves, the fact that they're willing to call out Huawei like this, their executive action on semiconductors and others, on top of Chinese kind of inward-looking, really want on their part to consolidate control and have no competing centers of government, make it a bad day for the Chinese markets. But in some ways, the CCP also doesn't really care. What they care about is control. They could care less about the economy itself.
I mean, that's something that's very different from here.
Oh, totally.
They have other goals and priorities than just like the stock market. And some of the numbers here, China's richest is from Bloomberg, lose $12.7 billion in a day following Xi's reshuffling and his re-anointment. You know, The richest tycoons lost $12.7 billion in market sell-off that followed Xi's tightening grip on the government. One of the things, like just specifically that they're pointing to, is that they're worried, there's going to be even more COVID-0 lockdowns and crackdowns. It's obviously bad for the economy, but overall, as you were pointing to, him really consolidating power with his closest allies and rooting out any sort of even remotely dissenting voices. They're worried about what that's going to mean for ultimately foreign investment. So a lot of people are just saying, guess what, we're out.
I mean, it's not a bad situation. I support it 100%. I guess if Wall Street wants to lead the way, they could be our guest. I just think it's absurd on several levels.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.